Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's program. I'm Emily. I'm one of the librarians here at Rockland Public Library, and we're thrilled to be hosting tonight's science talk. I want to start the night off with a couple quick programming notes on upcoming events this month at the library. Next week on July 8th, Erica Nadelhaft will be talking about Jewish resistance during the Holocaust. And the following week on July 15th, we'll be hosting a film screening of the 2020 film Through the Night. And I'm happy to introduce tonight's speaking organization. Marine Mammals of Maine is a nonprofit organization dedicated to marine mammal and sea turtle response, rescue, care, research, and education, with 2 staff and a dedicated volunteer team. Marine Mammals of Maine provides expert standing response across roughly 2,500 miles of Maine's coastline, including islands, covering the geographic area of Kittery to Rockland, providing both short and long-term rehabilitative care and operating a 24/7 marine mammal and sea turtle reporting hotline. Marine Mammals of Maine is a compassionate source of care for Maine's marine wildlife. And I will turn it over to Jessica. Go right ahead.
Thanks for that intro. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. I am a volunteer with Marine Mammals of Maine. I've been working with them for the last 4 years. What I do for the organization is I do educational events like this. I also am on the response team, so I will go out and assess injured animals or potentially injured animals on a beach, as well as helping care for the animals that we have in-house at our Marine Mammal Hospital here in Brunswick. So I'm going to share a little bit about the organization and the work that we do, the patients that we normally see, and then we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about whales here off the coast of Maine. As you heard, if you have questions throughout, feel free to type them into the chat, and then I'm definitely going to save time at the end for any questions that have come up throughout. So let me go ahead and bring up my picture. So we are going to focus on the world of whales, especially whales in the Gulf of Maine. And first, the overview of the organization. So Marine Mammals of Maine, we shorten that to MMoME, which kind of looks like it says mommy. So if you hear me say mommy, that's just what we refer to ourselves as, is mommy, Marine Mammals of Maine. A lot of you may have heard of us before. We are present in Rockland. We have a great volunteer up there that helps to assess and rescue marine mammals. Now, you heard in the description that we also respond to sea turtles. We know those are not mammals, but we are the only organization in Maine that is permitted to respond to sea turtles. We do get a lot of the sea turtles off the coast. They don't come up onto shore usually here in Maine, but they are off the coast. A lot of times our response for sea turtles is actually going out and trying to cut them out of any nets or debris that they get stuck in as they bring the Gulf Stream up this way. Now, Marine Mammals of Maine was founded 10 years ago and worked closely with the Marine Animal Rescue Center, the MARC Center, down in Portland. That was part of UNE. Now, what we did was we were the response team for the MARC Center. We would go assess an animal, bring it into the MARC Center if it needed care. But then abruptly in 2014, the MARC Center shut down the whole rescue center. And it was the busiest weekend of the year, Memorial Day weekend. So our staff, our team, were trying to stabilize seals and other animals in their driveways on the back of the truck, like you see in this picture here, because we had nowhere to take them. So we knew that we had to quickly pivot. So down in the bottom picture here, this is our founding director, Linda Doty. She has been running Marine Mammals of Maine since it was involved with MARC. And now she realized quickly we had to pivot and change how we were doing things. So we were quickly partnering with other centers out of the state because that was the only rescue center in Maine. So we would transport the animals to Massachusetts or to Connecticut to receive the care that they needed. But we knew that that wasn't going to be good enough. These animals, once they're not feeling well, they don't want to go on a road trip, as you can imagine. So we started a triage center. We got permitted through NOAA to have a triage center. We were able to keep these animals for up to 4 days and stabilize them with fluids and any medication and just some TLC. And then we were able to transport those animals back to those or out to those longer term care centers. And we had a higher success rate of those animals surviving that transport once we did that. But we didn't want to stop there. Just a couple of years ago, we were officially permitted for long-term care. So we do have marine mammal rehabilitation back in Maine, thanks to Linda and the hard work she put in to creating this organization. So we do triage animals still and transport them to other centers because we are limited in our capacity how many we can take in. So we will stabilize some and send those on their way, and then we do keep some for long-term care, and then hopefully end up releasing them back into the ocean. So the 4 pillars of what we do is we do response. We run a 24-hour hotline where we can get calls about animals on the beach. We want to know about them, whether they are alive or deceased. We get samples from the deceased that goes towards our research. We're able to provide a lot of data to different organizations all around the world, really. So that research is very important in learning more about the animals that we are working with. So we respond, we provide care to the ones that need it. And I will say the majority of the patients, actually 100% of the patients at our hospital are seals. But I'm going to talk about our work with whales in just a minute. So we provide care to the ones that need it. And of course, we do education. We've been finding that a lot of our cases, a lot of the animals that have to come into us, they are a result of humans not really knowing the proper protocol and what to do with these animals and what not to do if you find them. So that's why we started the education side of things, to get the word out there, to help others understand that it's against the law to approach these animals. You have to stay 150 feet away. They get so easily stressed that a dog barking at them can cause them to become ill. There's just a lot of issues that these animals sustain when they get stressed. So we want to spread the word about how to interact or not to interact with these animals once found on the beach. So as you heard, we do cover 2,500 miles of the Maine coast. We are located from Kittery up to Rockland, and our description has changed a little bit. We now have 3 staff members, full-time staff members, 1 seasonal, and we have 60 volunteers that are strategically spread up and down the coast here. So we can try to get people as close to that location as possible. So we don't have to go very far to, or have someone go very far to find out what's going on with that animal. So we cover all the way up to you all in Rockland. Now, north of Rockland and the rest of the coast, that is covered by Allied Whale, which is part of the College of the Atlantic. They have a response crew and volunteers that work for them. If they bring in a seal that needs some care, they all come to us. We are the only triage and rehabilitation center in Maine. Now, see someone just joined that I think I might know. Yay. Okay, so most of our patients, as I mentioned, are seals. So this is a harbor seal pup here. These are the patients that we have in our center right now. We have seven harbor seal pups. Seals are a bit different from whales because they are semi-aquatic. They spend a lot of their time out of the water, and not a lot of people realize that. But I'm sure, living on the coast, you've seen seals on the rocks, seals in the water. They are semi-aquatic. They're not truly meant to be in the water all the time, and they're not truly meant to be on land all the time. They split their time. And that's just to rest, recuperate from long travels or big hunting sessions, or just to warm up their bodies and to relax. So when we have these pups in our center, they get supervised swim time. So that's what this one is getting right now, as it gains some weight to be able to hold up in that cold ocean water. So we build up their water time and we build up their weight so that they can handle the cold water. So these are the seals that come into our rescue center. But we also respond to calls of cetaceans. So cetaceans are whales, dolphins, and porpoises. They're kind of all one big group. There are about 90 species of cetaceans, and we're going to kind of split them up into two groups in just a minute. But let's start our talk about these. Now, of course, we get more calls for seals than we do for cetaceans, and the way we respond is very different because logistically, what we're able to do for these larger cetaceans is very different from what we are able to do for a seal. So here are some of the common species and uncommon ones that you can find off the coast. Now, the largest ones that we get pretty regularly are the fin whales. Those are the second largest whales in the world. They reach lengths of up to 90-ish feet. I saw some of these off the coast of Booth Bay not too long ago, so they're out there, as well as humpbacks. We see those occasionally up and down the coast. Right whales, a little bit more rare as they're critically endangered. But one of the most common we see are minkies, kind of on the smaller side for a whale, but still a pretty large animal. And then, of course, the ones that we see a lot are harbor porpoises, and we do have dolphins off the coast. We get Atlantic white-sided and common dolphins as well. Now, there are some that are once in a while passerbys, like the orca that's pretty far off coast, heading up towards Canada is usually what they're doing. We also get the pilot whales, which we're going to hear a little bit more about as well. Usually we get the long-finned pilot whale. They like the colder water a little bit more than the short-finned pilot whales. Now, we split whales into two categories based on how they're able to eat. So we have two groups here. We have Odontoceti down here on the right. The Odontoceti are the toothed whales. They actually have teeth to hunt larger prey. So they have teeth just like we do. The other group of whales are the Mysticetes. The Mysticetes, that word actually means the mustached one because they have plates of baleen. And that baleen sometimes looks like a bristly mustache when they open their mouth. So Mysticeti and Odontoceti, it's all based on how they eat. I mentioned there's 90 species of cetaceans recognized right now. 15 to 16 of them are baleen whales. So a small portion of them are actually baleen. So because they have different forms to eat with, they are eating different materials. I mentioned the Odontocetes with the teeth are eating larger prey animals. The baleen whales are some of the largest species of whales. The blue whale, the largest whale in the world, that is a filter feeder. They eat 40 million krill every day. Now the blue whale, just to get an idea of the size, 110 feet. Its heart is the size of a small car. We could swim through the arteries. And their tongue alone weighs more than an elephant. That's how large the biggest whale, the biggest animal on the planet is. And that is a filter feeder. So it's pretty remarkable that the largest animals on the planet are eating the smallest food. So there's two ways that these baleen whales can get their food. They will do something called skimming, where they open their mouth and just skim the surface, collecting anything they can in there, which might not be really great right now because there is a lot of plastic pollution in our ocean. So they're not just gathering food items like plankton and krill, they're gathering anything that's in the water. The other way they can eat is gulping. You may notice how there's some lines on the throat of some whales. Those are grooves, and it kind of expands into a big mouth pouch. And they're able to fill their water with hundreds of gallons, or their mouth with hundreds of gallons of water. They take their large tongue and they press it to the roof of their mouth, squirting all the water through that baleen, and then they catch the plankton in the baleen. It's kind of like a net. Those baleen plates, they can have up to 400 of them around their mouth, and it's only on the top jaw. It would get really stuck together if they had it on the top and the bottom. So they have those plates of baleen, and that baleen is actually made out of the same material that our fingernails and hair are made out of, keratin. In this skeleton picture here on the bottom, you can tell that this is very much a baleen whale. Look how arched this top jaw is to make room for those plates of baleen. Then this is a right whale here, and then the top one is a sperm whale, which is a toothed whale. So you notice it doesn't have that big rounded top jaw for room for baleen. It just has teeth. But you might notice that there's something, looks like there's something missing in the forehead here, and we'll get to that in just a minute. One thing I wanted to point out about their skeleton structure, their body structure, and one of the reasons why cetaceans are not meant to be on land, if you look at these ribs, look at how skinny they are. Those skinny ribs attach around to a chest plate, just like we have. Now, as these whales are diving deep into the ocean, the sperm whale is the deepest diver of all the whales, they are getting really heavy water pressure on their bodies. That's why us frail humans can only dive so deep into the ocean. The water pressure would just crack our bones. For the whales, to protect them, their rib cage actually folds in a little bit. It kind of caves in a bit so that the water pressure down deep in the ocean doesn't crack their ribs. So they're designed to be deep in the water, not to be on land. If they do come up on land, that means all of their weight is resting on those skinny ribs that are not meant to hold a whale's weight. So the biggest problem with whales or cetaceans being out of the water is that massive amount of weight on their body. They can be, I mean, technically, if they dry, you know, it's not like a fish. They're breathing air, so it's okay. They can get sunburned still, just like we can. And seals have fur to prevent them from getting burns. But the whales, it's all about their body structure. And you might notice these little bones down here. These are vestigial bones. These are basically left over from their history of originating as land mammals. These are leftover hip bones that they no longer need. So I mentioned that it looks like there's something missing here on the sperm whale's head. Since these whales have teeth and not the baleen, they're not going to skim, they're not going to gulp the water. They're actually out hunting for the larger food items. So they use that echolocation. They're using sounds. And let me show you how it works. So that little part that I mentioned looks like it's missing from the sperm whale's head. There's an organ that sits on the forehead of toothed whales that baleen whales do not have because they don't need it. This is called a melon. This melon is full of oil, and that's actually one of the big reasons that whales used to be hunted back in the day is oil lamps were powered by whale oil, and they used all parts of the body, the blubber and everything. So the melon is full of oil. Now, these animals do not have vocal cords like we do, so they have to make their noises from their nose. Their nasal cavity is their blowhole. They have it on the top of their head so that they don't have to come all the way up out of the water to get a breath. They just barely graze the surface and they can get a breath. So what they do is they push air around in their blowhole to make their noises. Those noises go through the melon, and the melon can actually change shape to help send the sounds in different directions, which is really amazing. They have this organ that makes their head nice and round up here, and it's kind of like changing shapes, and it's really jelly-like. And that helps them to send out their echolocation sounds, which go out and they hit things that are surrounding them, and then they bounce back to them. As that echo comes back, it hits their bottom jaw first. That bottom jaw is hollow, but it is filled with the same oil that's in the melon. So when those echo waves come back, it hits the lower jaw and causes that oil to vibrate in their jaw up into their ears and then into their brain, and that helps them to form pictures about what's out around them, how far away it is, how fast it's moving. All of that happens in their face pretty much. Let me make sure I'm sharing my sound here so I can show you what I believe this is a pilot whale. Yeah, echolocating. This is what they sound like.
We're not getting sound over here, Jessica.
Oh, let me make sure. Oops. Thank you for letting me know. And It should be working now. Let's try it again. So they're making a series of clicks, and you can tell it's definitely sounds like air being kind of blown around. I sometimes feel like it's like when you start blowing up a balloon and then you like pull on it and let the air out a little bit, and it's like, making funny sounds. Kind of sounds like that to me sometimes. But each species of whale kind of has their different sounds that they make. They also, it's been found, have the ability to give names to each other in their pods. They use a certain sound for certain individuals, which is really interesting. There's been a lot coming out this year about whale cultures. And I find it so interesting to learn about another animal that what they do is they get information and they pass it down from generation to generation. And that's culture. So there's even like different orcas all over the world, they've learned to hunt based on where they live in their region and what techniques are best there. So there's actually a show out right now, The Secret of Whales, and they go through 5 or 6 different species and they talk about the different cultures. And for the orcas, there was a pod that had to learn how to go up on shore a little bit, trying to grab some food, an animal, sometimes sea lions. So what they did was once they had that mastered, the matriarch in that pod would pass it down to each generation. Now, if you weren't a member of that pod, you didn't get all the information. It showed another male trying to hunt after watching that pod be successful, and he just couldn't quite do it because he didn't get all the little tips and tricks that the grandma of the pod was passing down to the rest of them. So it's just really fascinating. Their family groups, we're learning so much more about how they survive in different regions. Now, here are some of the cetaceans we have responded to in the past. Long-finned pilot whale, harbor porpoises happen pretty regularly, Atlantic white-sided dolphins here and there, and a minke whale. We have last year, we responded to 3 beaked whales, which are not always seen off the coast of Maine. So it was really a big deal to get a lot of data and samples from those animals. They obviously they didn't survive. So we were able to take samples and provide them to different studies as they learn more about these species that are usually too terrified to even be around boats. So we don't see them very often. So it's quite the interesting experience last year with some of them. But what I wanted to do was go through a few case studies that we've had and talk through what happened and why this is important, and then looking at some more pictures. So some reasons that cetaceans will strand on the beach is due to illness, injury, and disorientation. Like I said, they don't want to come out of the water if they don't have to. There's an immediate emergency if they are out of the water, whereas a seal, that's totally normal. So our response is a bit different. It's more urgent. I mean, it's urgent for all of our animals, but we know there's something really wrong going on. We might get a call for a seal that's totally fine and just needs people to give it space. But for these animals, if they're out of the water, then we know something's happening. What's interesting too is that regionally we see different kind of stranding events. So like this is one individual pilot whale that we only found the one. Now in Massachusetts and other places, a whole pod will strand. So they're experiencing more mass strandings, and we kind of get the individuals, which not really sure why that is, but it's just interesting how regionally different things are happening. So our first case study is the one and only in recent years cetacean rescue successful rehabilitation. So this is a harbor porpoise that was found up close to shore, clearly not feeling well. Our team was dispatched and they were able to rescue this animal alive. Now it's covered in blankets and things like that. Like I said, they can get sunburn outside, and that's just to keep their skin wet, even though it's not super necessary. It's to help regulate their temperature as well. Now we transported it after a couple of days of triage. We transported it to a center that doesn't exist anymore, but they had a pool big enough to take on this animal. And it was affectionately named Noodle. So this is Noodle, the harbor porpoise. We were able to collect data and samples from this animal as we do all of our live animals. We collect data and samples from them as well. Now look at that face. Oh my goodness. So here's the difference between a harbor porpoise and a dolphin. Look at that short snout. It doesn't have that long dolphin nose. And its dorsal fin is a lot shorter, a little rounder. After several months of intensive care, Noodle was released back into the ocean off the coast of Massachusetts, right here. Now, this animal, not including the staff time and the resources that were used here at MMoME, this animal just at the other center we took it to, it cost $20,000 to rehabilitate this animal successfully. On average, it costs $8,000 to $10,000 to rehabilitate a seal. So it's really unfortunate, but sometimes we do have to put a dollar value on an animal. It's hard to be in that situation, but this work is all donation based. We are not, even though we're permitted through the government does not fund this work. So these animals, we really have to consider what resources are available for these animals. And sometimes we're forced to make really challenging decisions. Luckily, this animal seemed to be doing well in the rehab setting. And so the resources were put into this animal and we were able to release it, which is super exciting. Now this one had a very different ending. This one is already deceased here. This is an Atlantic white-sided dolphin. This was found in southern Maine. And this one is a cautionary tale that sometimes things that we put out into the environment, we forget all about them, but they're showing up somewhere and they're making an impact. This dolphin was collected. We did a necropsy on this, which is an autopsy on an animal, a necropsy, and we found a balloon lodged in its airway. So it essentially drowned because it had swallowed a balloon that ended up in the ocean. Now, there are some places I read recently off the coast of Virginia, like in Virginia, it's against the law to release balloons like this. And I think more states need to follow behind. Maine, it was in talks of having this happen, but it didn't go through. A lot of people like to release balloons, but once they're out of our sight, they're out of our mind, right? But what goes up must come down. And a lot of times these items are ending up in these animals' homes, causing a lot of issues for them. So this was really unfortunate, but it just goes to show like this, it's an example of we are having an impact on these animals, whether we notice it or not. Now this one was a humpback whale that washed ashore, no longer alive. You can see our dedicated team here is going out into the water to sample this animal. It's too large, of course, to pull out of the water. And sometimes we will pull them out, sometimes we won't. It all depends on the logistics, how easy it is, and do we have the resources. So samples were taken from this animal and used in studies all over the country. And this is mostly to find out more about the animal, more about the overall population and what's going on out there in the ocean for these animals. Now, here are some of the logistics taking place of how we have to deal with cetaceans. And as I mentioned, they're already in bad shape when they wash up. Most of our calls are animals that are no longer alive, for the whales anyway. So we do our best to get some equipment to remove these animals so that they're not causing any issues being left on the beach. And we move them to a site where we are able to perform a necropsy. We have a relationship with a farm that allows us to bring these animals there. We will do the necropsy and then they compost the animal for us. We also work with a lot of Marine Patrol officers. We get a lot of help when needed, and we have to have some creative solutions to moving these animals around. Obviously, this minke is not alive anymore. We're trying to get it off out of the water and off to our site for data collection. Now, this one I wanted to show you. This is a right whale that was found years ago. This is how massive that animal is. It took a semi and multiple cranes and excavators to remove this animal from the water and bring it to the site. It's just incredible size. So obviously centers anywhere would not have the capacity to take in an animal like this. So here we have our data extraordinaire, Katie, one of our staff members who is collecting data from a pilot whale. We do DNA samples, so we swab around the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and the rectum to get information about any parasites, diseases, DNA, all of that. We will take some data samples too. We measure everything because a lot of times measurements is how we can age the animal or figure out the age class that it most likely belongs to. Ways to help. So I'm sharing a lot of these case studies, and there's always something we all can do to help out. So reporting anything that you see, any animal that's stranded or odd behaviors happening right in the water, living or deceased, we want to know about it. We document any deceased seal, anything like that, just because we're tracking for any patterns that we're noticing in different locations. Making sure to give the animal space and leaving it alone. As I mentioned, it's the law to stay 150 feet away from a marine mammal, whether on land or in the water. Now, 150 feet is hard to gauge when you're just standing on a beach. The rule that I follow is that if I stand back far enough and I put my thumb out, close one eye, my virtual background isn't allowing it, but close one eye, if I can cover the animal with my thumb, I am far enough away. If I cannot, I need to back up. Also, you can judge by how, if the animal is living, how it's responding to you. If it's very aware of your presence, then you're probably a little too close. So anyone approaching within that 150 feet is technically harassment to this animal. Now, we have all been used to staying 6 feet apart this last year and a half, so 150 feet is much further. This mentions leaving it alone. Attempting to remove it or move it to the water is very dangerous if the animal is living or if it's deceased. They're large animals. So the best thing to do is leave it right where you find it and kind of ignore that human urge we have to help, knowing that there are experts that know exactly what to do and would do probably a better job than just someone guessing at what to do. So here's our hotline number. Again, it's 24/7. We return all calls that we get, and we try to dispatch someone to every call that we get as well. And if it's a deceased animal, we are not always able to remove it from the beach, so we will mark it with non-toxic paint marker so that we know we've already checked on that animal. So be looking for any signs of like orange or green on that animal as well. That means we've already been there. So here are some other ways to help. Through NOAA Fisheries, there is this safe viewing guidelines, and I can put it in the chat afterwards, but these safe viewing guidelines are how to observe one of these animals from afar, what to watch for stress responses, and just how to move forward if something is going on. So these are great. Reducing waste by minimizing use of single-use plastics is really important. Like I showed you with that balloon, like so much ends up in the ocean, unfortunately, and that's these animals' homes, and it's really unfortunate when they can't avoid it anymore. Supporting your local stranding response organization is really important too, because we do the best we can with the funding that we have, and we do need support from the local community. to be able to continue doing this work and really making sure that there is a presence for marine mammal rescue and response here in Maine. Our website here is at the bottom, MMoME.org, MMoME. We have a seal shop on there. Don't worry, you're not going to be able to buy seals on there, but we have lots of great seal items. Most of these pictures are some of our patients from the past. So we have a lot of great items on that. We are on all social media pretty much. We post YouTube videos regularly to keep people updated on our current patients or our current phone calls that we're getting. What we do is we really try to share the good and the bad. That's important because a lot of people just think that they can call us, we will respond, and that animal is saved, the end, where there's a lot of steps in between. So we try to share all aspects of the work we do to help people better understand. So we do that in videos. Also, if you're our website, you can sign up for newsletters and you can get those videos sent right to your email. We're on Facebook and Instagram where we post regular updates on our current patients and our case studies that we're working on. Also, the Amazon logo is on here because we do, through our website, you can find an Amazon wish list. All the supplies that we need help with procuring, we have on Amazon wish list, and they are all supplies that are meant for our hospital to be able to provide care to the animals that we're bringing in. Also to help us continue with data collection for the larger animals. Also, if you shop Amazon regularly, you can shop Amazon Smile. You can select Marine Mammals of Maine as your charity of choice, and small donations for each purchase go towards those organizations, and it costs you nothing extra. So those are all great things that you can do to help out. Also, we just announced that our biggest fundraiser of the year had to virtual is going to be in person in some way. That is in October, October 9th, we have Ocean Commotion, which is a 5K run or walk on the beautiful Hermit Island. The owners there allow us to take over the island for the day. Beautiful landscape through the woods and along the water. Dogs, well-behaved dogs, are invited to join their people in the run and walk. It's our biggest fundraiser of the year for our adorable little animal patients. So let me get that website for you. And I want to thank you all for spending some time with me this evening. And I did want to share the rest of the time for any questions that may have come up. Feel free to unmute and ask any questions, or you can type them into the chat and I'd be happy to read through that and answer that way. And here's the website for those viewing marine life rules. Actually, maybe I can just bring it up really quick here. All right, so through NOAA, there's all these proper viewing behaviors. So how your actions impact these animals, what to do around whales, dolphins, porpoises, what to watch for stress responses, same with seals and sea lions, and also sea turtles. And one thing I encourage you, if any of you are really interested in whale watching, I love to go out at least once a year. And I love to go out from different locations, but making sure that you select an organization that follows those safe viewing rules. They are very open about following those, and they will post that on their website that they do. So that really shows that that organization is dedicated to the conservation of these animals and giving you a safe experience that is going to be the least impact on those animals. So that's really important to pay attention to. Volunteers in the area. We are always open to volunteers, maybe some response volunteers as well. What I would encourage you to do is email info, I'm typing it into the chat. and they will let you know current volunteer opportunities. It's been really different with COVID, but now they're, able to bring on some new volunteers. So feel free to reach out and they will let you know what they are able to do. We always love to have as many people as we can on response in the area. And I think, is Jan on here? If this is Jan the volunteer, Jan knows that Jan gets a lot of calls for Rockland area. Awesome. Are there any other questions? I may have saved too much time for questions. I did mention that we have 6 patients in-house right now. 6, or last time I was in, there were 6. That changes, it seems like, all the time. But we have harbor seals right now. So right now is kind of the end of harbor seal pupping season. They start to have their babies in May and June, and we start to see a lot of human interaction pieces then. People see babies on the beach and they think, oh my gosh, this baby's all alone, it must need help. But really, the baby can't be in the cold water for very long. So the mom will say, hey, you sit right here and I'll be back when I'm finished eating. And so we see that baby and think it needs help. And the baby's just like, oh no, I'm just waiting for my mom to come back. But if we intervene, then that might mean the mom can't return to that baby. And its best chance of survival is out in the wild with its mom. So we try our best to prevent that from happening. Oh, I'm so glad you asked about this. What kind of whale swallowed the Massachusetts diver? Has this ever happened before? Okay. So I want to clear up a few things. I saw this headline and it made me cringe so hard because that whale was a humpback whale. Humpback whales are filter feeders. So they have the baleen. Now, what happened was that diver got in the way of that humpback whale who was gulping and skimming to collect food. The whale said, oh, there's something big in my mouth, and spit him out. Technically, those whales only have a throat the size of a grapefruit. They cannot swallow anything bigger than that. So the media again was sensationalizing that to the extreme. He was not swallowed. He did end up in its mouth a little bit, but he got in the way of some feeding humpback whales. But they have been known to do that, not humans, but accidentally pick up a sea lion and then spit it out, or pick up some trash and then spit it out. But they can't swallow anything larger than a grapefruit. Their throat is made for small items. Yeah, I'm sure he thought he was going down the throat. I'm sure he's like, this is the end and I'm going to be swallowed by this whale. And not a lot of people realize that that whale can't swallow him. So he probably, I'm sure that was terrifying. And just to end up in a whale's mouth is quite the experience that I don't think most people would want to have. So while he did end up partially in the mouth, the media definitely sensationalized that story a little bit. And he is very lucky that he was not injured and survived. Lesson learned, do not get in the way of a hungry whale. Are there any other questions before we kind of wrap up? A little bit early, but I'll stick around for a few minutes if anyone wants to ask any further questions. Otherwise, the rest of you have a great evening. Hopefully you enjoy this weather that's finally cooling down a little bit. So thank you so much for being here, and feel free to check us out on our website, on social media, anything like that to keep up to date with what we're working on. There was also a Channel 6 news story out recently about our founder and director, Linda. She is a CNN Hero of the Year recipient right now in the top 10. So that's really exciting. She's been recognized nationally for the work that she does. So you can find that video on Channel 6.